I'm going to look at the camera.
Yeah, perfect.
Right. Hi, everybody. My name is George Fritz Hahn. I'm the mayordomo and treasurer of the Vigili Romo Acequia and one of your town of Taos councilors. So the property that we are irrigating is off of the Vigili Romo Acequia, and it's 20.5 acres of once farmed, now fallow land.
And that is called the Cornelio Basin?
Oh,
Sorry.
thanks, man. This 20.5 acres is due south of Fred Baca Park. It was farmed by Cornelio Vigil back in the day, and so we call this area the Cornelio Basin. It is the desagüe for the Acequia Madre del Rio Pueblo, and it also serves as one of the town's flood mitigation areas, but we call it the Cornelio Basin. So we have been working on restoring our Vigili Romo Acequia for the last 4 years. The first year was pretty much spent getting some engineering and local ideas as to how we could reimagine and rebuild our compuerta, the opening off the river into the ditch. When the town of Taos built Salazar Road, a main thoroughfare here in town, they could not get over the ditch without creating a big hump. Well, this was back in the day when farming was definitely diminishing, the town was growing, and there was very little thought put into our cultural and water sustainability heritage, that of our acequias. So instead of creating a big bump in the road on Salazar, the town just kept it level. As a result of that road staying level, the compuerta, or the entrada, the entrance of the water into the Vigil, got lowered as well, and that change in elevation then occluded the ditch and kept it from being able to carry water. So year 3, we went out and obtained grants in engineering. Year 2, we devoted to the construction of our new diversion and weir and compuerta. And last year we ran water well into the summer. We had a great runoff, and we were able to run water for the first time down this acequia to the end, to the terminus of the acequia at the Cornelio Basin. So it's my understanding that back in the day that Reuben Vigil, the last person to have farmed this area 50 years ago, did have some cattle along with his, what I'm going to call a kitchen garden. He had an apple orchard, and a few of those trees survive to this day.
Do you have trouble dealing with invasive weeds on this property?
So right now, the Cornelio Basin is full of invasive species. We've got a very fine crop of Scotch thistle happening, musk thistle, Canada thistle. To the town's credit, whenever, even though we're short-staffed and underpaid out there, whenever the Parks and Rec Department or Public Works has a guy with an extra hour, we'll get out there and mow, we'll mitigate those. And when we compare our invasive mitigation this year to last year, we have been dealing mechanically with our Scotch and musk thistle with great success. So invasive species are a huge issue. You name it, we got it. The big offenders, though, Scotch and musk.
How do you define soil health?
I define soil health with humility. When I look at the Cornelio Basin and I think about Cornelio Vigil, whom we lovingly have named this basin after, and all of the work it took for he and the Romos to get this ditch the 1.5 miles down to where it is, that was a task of blood, sweat, and tears.
What would you like to see for the future of the soil health, in particular, of the Cornelio Basin?
From my perspective as the mayordomo on this ditch and the primary caretaker of the Cornelio Basin, I need help. My level of expertise has to become much greater than what it is. I know enough to get us in trouble. I need expert guidance as to how to begin to mitigate this soil. It's been neglected for so long. 2 years ago, it was just a dust bowl. And now we've got a fine cover crop happening of invasive species. Not all of it, but a lot of it. So I need help as to what the soil content is, the best kind of seeding to put down there, when to put it down. My big source of concern right now is we're looking at a La Nina. We didn't plant in the spring because we were looking at the drought. We probably aren't going to plant this fall. We might, but with La Nina looming, I'd really like to get the best bang for our buck. I need help. What kind of seed? Low maintenance, best for the community. What kind of seed, what kind of cover crop will help to put nourishment back into the soil so that we can reclaim this once fertile area that now quite literally has been until last year a fallow dust bowl. So I need help, and so thank you for your consideration.
My name is Robert Andrew or Andy Martinez. I'm from right here. I grew up here. My family's been ranching in this valley for 6 generations, and I'm basically living on family land.
How much land do you have here that you irrigate?
Just over 40 acres, and our main ditch here is the Acequia Madre de la Loma de Ranchitos Abajo.
How long have you been working the land here?
Mostly all my life. I bought my first cattle when I was, actually my father gave me a cow when I was in the 5th grade. I went out, got a bank loan when I was in the 6th grade, and I bought 5 registered heifers.
Wow.
And that's what started my herd all that time ago. And of course, running cattle with my father and my brother-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
And so we spend the 8 months of the year here on our land and as grazing. We raise hay in the summertime to feed them over the winter and spring. In the summertime, we graze for 4 months as National Forest permittees on the Carson National Forest in Taos Canyon.
So in all of your experience working the land here, how do you define soil health?
Well, I define soil health based on how productive it is, what it's growing, and so if it is, if it is growing in volume and diversity, then I basically assume the soil is healthy. Where I have problems growing, a diverse, set of grasses, then I understand. I know I have a problem.
So you have animals here on the land. How long are they rotationally grazed, or?
Well, yeah, they are in the sense that so they're on the National Forest for 4 months of the year, and during the rest of the year, for instance, I'll start here. This is a 10-acre pasture, and it's had all summer to grow, and it has, again, mixture of grasses. I've tried to improve diversity here, kind of again with marginal results, and so I'll be here for the month of October, maybe 4 or 5 weeks here, and while I also harvest my calves, take them to market, and then once this pasture is done, I'll move into the next pasture. So basically those back 20 acres, I'll be back there through the end of February.
For your property, do you think, in your opinion, that the soil health is good?
No, I think it really needs to be improved. Again, I base this on, how difficult it is to get more species growing. Again, the attempts I've done at both, disking the soil and drilling in seed, to even the no-till this year wasn't all that successful, although my meadows, I do see more varieties, more of a mix in there.
Yeah.
But it was such a bad year that my hay production on my first cut was about 50%. My second cut was about 25%.
Really?
And so
gone down.
So it might not have had a good enough chance to really take hold. Next year may be different if we have a good moisture year, and actually some of that started up but didn't really take off.
Right.
I could see a lot of what I planted this year maybe next year.
Coming up again. What kind of vision do you have for the future of this land?
Although I don't feel like an old guy. I am an old guy. Although the average age of the farmer and rancher was 69 last year. It's probably 70 this year. Okay. So it's hard to have too much vision for myself. Okay. So my goal is to bring this land up to the best production it can be. I also will seek other lands to lease or purchase if possible. And what I'd like to do is to provide something for the next generation. I have 3 children. 2 of them had to leave to find opportunity. They both would prefer to be living here. The third one, she may leave, only she's a teacher, and that's what's keeping her here. Otherwise, she'd be gone too.
Right.
And so they want to come back. I want to give them something to come back to, is what I'd like to do, is my goal.
My name is Ed Rether. My background is a teacher, a special education teacher, and also a drug and alcohol counselor.
How long have you been working the land here?
This is my 5th year here in Taos. I have about 3.5 acres off the south ditch of the Rio Fernando that I irrigate.
What have you been experimenting with as far as your crops?
Well, initially I started with corn, but corn was a little too much on the soil. It took too much out of the soil. And then I investigated what was growing here in the early parts of the 20th century to go to the old ways of farming.
Yeah.
And I found that this was a large grain area for wheat and rye. So I've now focused in on wheat and rye to grow.
What kind of results have you had from initial trials of that?
Well, different parts of the land are yielding different results. So overall, I'm getting a very good yield out of the wheat and the rye.
How do you define soil health in your daily practices?
Well, because I don't use chemicals or anything like that, it's a primarily organic method. So health would be about the microorganisms in the soil, the amount of water, and the crop coverage, the coverage on the soil, so much of this New Mexico sun doesn't dry out all the soil.
Have you ever had animals on the land here, or has that ever been a consideration as far as integrating animals onto the land?
No, I have not had animals on the land, and I'll tell you why. My neighbor has chickens, so there's lots of coyotes here, and then they'll attack the different animals. I've thought about goats, but again, that's more work than I want to do.
Given all of that, do you think that the soil health here on your land is good, or if not, what would you like to see different?
Well, overall, it's very good because the yield is showing itself to be a lot, bountiful. Now, there are portions of the land that are very good, and there are portions on the lower acreages that need to be rebuilt. And that's where I have to kind of rebuild the soil with fertilizers and crops that will put nutrients back into the soil and putting on a grass cover to protect it from the sun. So there is soil here, or parts of the acreage that need to be rebuilt. But overall, thanks to the goodness of the water that comes out of these mountains, this has been a good place to grow.
So how much wheat and rye did you get with this year's harvest?
Well, quite a bit. I haven't measured it, but it's been more this old man can deal with. So what I have to do is I have to have little silos. So I still have a number of large garbage cans with the grain heads in them that I've cut from the top of the stalks. Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
Quite
Happily.
the labor of love.
Yeah. No, it's definitely nice to be eating your bread that you baked, that you milled, that you grew. There's something special about that.
In all of that, what do you envision for the future of your land?
I really do want to establish the ancient grain that was grown here 100 years ago. So I want to establish and reestablish the ancient crop of grains, wheat and rye.
Do you think you would sell at local markets, or do you kind of picture more of the bartering system?
I want to stay with the bartering. Fortunately, I don't have to do this as a living at my age. I've been fortunate to be comfortably retired. So I want to stay with the bartering. So there's a person over here who has a dairy farm, and so I will get my butter and my milk and my yogurt and my ghee from her. And there are people over here who have goats and wool, and there are people over there that have vegetables, and they want my fruit and my grain. So there's a barter.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to
Well, thank
talk
you for
with us.
coming.
I'm Judy Campbell, and my husband Steve and I live here about 3 years. And we built a home and have lived in the home 2 years.
Have you had animals on the land here in the past? Or?
We have not. This was a working rodeo grounds for years, but those people sold out about 15 years ago. Don't think they grazed animals on it. I think it was just the rodeo.
How do you define soil health?
The soil health should have microbes in it. The ground should not be bare. I think that if it was healthier, the grass would grow more instead of just the weeds. So we've got kochia grass, amaranth, lots of bindweed, and those kind of thrive in poor soil. So that's another indication the soil is poor. It's very hard. There's clay in it, there's caliche in it. Down by the river it's much different. It's more organic, softer, darker, richer.
And did you plant some seed previously on this front field?
Right. We just used kind of a drag behind the ATV and drug it to kind of break up mainly the amaranth. Not break the soil up, just kind of break the weed clumps up.
Yeah.
And then used a little seeder machine and seeded this 1 acre. Then Steve took hay and, not hay, he did straw. Took by hand and went and covered it completely, pretty much. We left a little strip over here to see what's the difference.
Yeah.
Is it better without the straw? Is it worse without the straw? It didn't make a difference. And then we did that right before it snowed. We watched the weather.
Yeah.
And we had a good snow that time, maybe 6 inches. And it stayed a long time. And then that was the only water. We don't water the ground out here.
Yeah.
Water's a little precious right now.
Definitely.
So there's places where the grass grew in little clumps, but overall we thought it was a failure. We're going to do it again this time. We're going to see what kind of a little, maybe there's an aerator or something that would poke some small holes. We don't till, maybe poke some small holes for aeration, and then the seed would fall in there, and then we'll cover it again, because I think otherwise the birds are going to eat the seeds. And then when we get wind, the dirt's just, it goes to Kansas.
Yes. So as far as looking into the future, what do you envision for years to come on this property?
To be able to use Acequia water and continue to enrich it. I think if it has water and manure put on it, then the soil microbes are going to, we've got earthworms. They're just like where it's so hard and compacted, you can't even get a shovel in it.
Yeah.
But once you put some manure in it and water, then the earthworms just show up. And so they're adding to the biodiversity of it, and everything you do makes a difference.
So do you eventually hope to expand any garden space?
Yeah, I would. I've got 5 different garden spaces, so, and work-wise, that's plenty.
A lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to have the rest of the area just richer. I think the Healthy Soils Project is a really worthwhile project, and learning about weeds, which there was several seminars the last couple of summers about weeds, and we don't use fertilizers, but it just helps to know what they are, and a lot of them have benefits too.
Yeah.
They're not just bad weeds.
Totally.
Thank you, Maya.
Yeah, thanks.